Hi, I'm Jonathan Spreier from Meet the Boss TV. This week I'm in Arlington, Virginia, home to the offices of Hay Group, a global human resources management consultancy firm that work with leaders to transform strategy into reality. I've come to meet with Scott Spreier, their senior leadership and talent consultant for the federal government sector.
People are cranky and tired and stressed at a leadership level like the White House. It's executive leadership writ large. It's executive leadership on steroids. Most of us don't just naturally turn into good leaders. It takes time.
Hay Group has 86 offices in 48 countries. Their clients come from the private, public and not-for-profit sectors across every major industry. They represent diverse business challenges and they say that they make change happen. What advice would perhaps you give to a supervisor that's looking to go into the leadership? I guess tomorrow's leaders. What advice would you give to them?
Two things really. I would tell them one, to remember it's not about them anymore. And two, it's all about them. And what I mean by that is most supervisors come up the ranks as individual contributors. They're high achievers. They've made it with their skills, with their abilities, with their drive. And all of a sudden they find themselves in a leadership role. And most of us don't just naturally turn into good leaders. It takes time. And so what we do as young supervisors is we try to lead by doing. We sort of are out there directing, setting the pace, rather than being true leaders. So once you become a supervisor, once you become a leader, even at a low level, you have to start leading less out of your achievement drive and more out of your, for lack of a better word, impact and influence. And I think that's very hard for most of us who've made that step. I know it was for me, and a lot of people I talked to struggled with the same issue. I think the other part of that, it's all about them, is too often I think young supervisors, new supervisors, focus on their role. They focus on the skills, the competencies for the role. They never really look at themselves and say, who am I and what I bring to the table? What motivates me? What drives me? Do I have the emotional intelligence I need to get the most out of the people who are working for me or that I'm leading? That's very important. A huge issue is self-image. For most of us, as we move into leadership and up the leadership ranks, our self-image doesn't keep up with the role we're in. It tends to lag behind. And so sometimes we don't see ourselves when we look in the mirror as the leader that other people see us as. And I've seen this at all levels, from new supervisors to CEOs. A story, not long ago I was coaching a senior vice president of a global manufacturing company. He'd just been named vice president of a huge region, manufacturing for the whole region. And he was struggling. And he said to me, I'm struggling because I know I'm supposed to be thinking strategically now. But what I really like to do is go visit the factories and go down on the floor and talk with the guys and find out what's going on. And we got to talking, and he allowed us how he had started at this very same company 35 years earlier as a forklift operator. And spoke of that with real pride. And I said to him finally, and Joe, when you look in the mirror in the morning, what do you see? Do you see an executive or do you see a forklift operator? And he said, I see a forklift operator. And we all have that sort of lag in how we see that selves, and it's very important that we change our image as we move up the leadership rank.
What would you say is perhaps one quality that has derailed most leaders?
Getting into a role that they really aren't clear about and don't understand. And it's not necessarily the fault of the individual. They may be put into a role that on the surface looks like a wonderful match. But if you really analyze that role and what is needed in that role to be effective, they don't have that experience. They don't have those competencies. They've not yet developed those competencies, and that's what often derails.
Recently, Hay Group was part of the group that worked on the Presidential Leadership Appointee Programme, which I believe was an initiative that has been utilised by administrations past and present to support and align senior advisors. What differences or even commonalities are there between running a business and running a country?
At a leadership level like the White House, it's executive leadership writ large. It's executive leadership on steroids. You come in, you have no time to pull together your team. You have almost a limitless number of constituents and different types of constituents that you're trying to deal with. You're under the microscope, not only by people here at home, but around the world. There's the political aspect. So it's an incredibly complex leadership role with, and everybody knows this, with all sorts of moving pieces. But when you come down to it, I think a lot of the principles of leadership that we've talked about hold true even if you're the President of the United States. Again, it's about articulating the vision. And not just the vision, but really getting people to sort of buy into that vision and to come along with you. There's a need to create trust. And if you look at most organizations that, again, coming out of the last 2 years, one of the things the leaders are really struggling to do is recapture the trust that the organization, the people once had.
What's the difference between the sort of federal government sector and perhaps a private sector for the work that you do?
Well, the federal government is a large machine, a large bureaucracy, and there's a reason it is. The challenge, I think, is on several levels. For starters, every 4 to 8 years you get a new administration with a new agenda. So your top leadership of all the agencies changes very frequently. You have a level of appointees who then must interact and engage a very senior civil service and senior executive workforce. So again, they each have their own agendas. They're trying to push down within their agencies. So it's a real challenge for them, but it's also a challenge for the career civil servants who face new management, if you will, every 2 to 4 years often. And I think the challenge for leaders in the federal government is, again, how do you engage how do you engage these career civil servants? How do you really bring them aboard quickly with what the agenda is and have them help you move it forward? I think that's hard. Another issue, just like the private sector, is a huge number of leaders in the federal sector are about to retire in the next decade. So there is a need for, again, growing that next level of leaders that can jump in and take over.